What grotesque thing would some in Israel resort to when their enemies besieged them? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Deuteronomy on Walking Through the Bible. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Deuteronomy 28. We're going to be reading from verses 47 to 57. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So Deuteronomy 28, beginning of verse 47. Because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart, for the abundance of everything, therefore you shall serve your enemies, whom the Lord will send against you, in hunger, in thirst, in nakedness, and in need of everything. And he will put a yoke of iron on your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies, a nation whose language you will not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which does not respect the elderly, nor show favor to the young. And they shall eat the increase of your livestock and the produce of your land, until you are destroyed. They shall not leave you grain, or new wine, or oil, or the increase of your cattle, or the offspring of your flocks, until they have destroyed you. They shall besiege you at all your gates, until your high and fortified walls, in which you trust, come down throughout all your land. And they shall besiege you at your gates throughout all your land, which the Lord your God has given you. You shall eat of the fruit of your own body, the flesh of your sons and your daughters, whom the Lord your God has given you, in the siege and in desperate straits in which your enemy shall distress you. The sensitive and very refined man among you will be hostile towards his brother, towards the wife of his bosom, and towards the rest of the children whom he leaves behind, so that they will not give any of them the flesh of his children, whom he will eat, because he has nothing left in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemy shall distress you at your gates. The tender and delicate woman among you, who would not venture to set the sole of her foot on the ground because of her delicateness and sensitivity, will refuse to the husband of her bosom, and to her son and her daughter, her placenta, which comes out from between her feet, and her children whom she bears, for she will eat them secretly for the lack of everything in the siege and desperate straits in which your enemy shall distress you at all your gates. In our last 3 lessons, we've been looking at the many curses that God would send upon Israel for their disobedience. As we've gone through the chapter, we've seen 4 groups of curses, noting that God would curse the land, curse the Israelite people themselves with the disease, and then tell them that they would be taken off into captivity. But with each set of curses, God would return to what he's already cursed before, and seemingly make it worse. Not only would the land not produce food, but what food it did produce would be eaten by the enemy. Not only would Israel have to face disease, it would be incurable disease. The same is true here in this section with the 4th group of curses. God had already told Israel that they would be taken off into captivity if they went off into disobedience. Here he tells us how bad the invaders will be and what Israel's reaction to them will be. The nation that would come against them would be from afar. In other words, it wouldn't be the Edomites, the Moabites, or the Ammonites, peoples that were related to them and thus maybe might have shown them some mercy. No, it was going to be a nation whose language they didn't understand. This nation would be fierce in how it acted, in that it wouldn't respect the elderly to spare them, nor would they respect the young to spare them. Sometimes in war, nations will determine that there are certain groups of people that shouldn't be killed. These are usually women and children and any of those who cannot go out to war. The nation that would besiege Israel wouldn't care. It would kill whomever they liked. And what would be Israel's reaction to this be? It would be something utterly grotesque. Cannibalism. Fathers would eat their children. Mothers would eat their newborns. They would be so hungry, they not only would they eat each other, but they would try and stop anybody who wanted them to share their food. Think about how depraved someone has to be to let alone eat another human being, but it be their children. But that is how far Israel has fallen by this point. And when you look at the rest of Bible history, we're going to see the exact things spoken of by God here come to pass. Israel went after idols, and after centuries of reproof, God finally had enough. The Assyrians took the northern nation of Israel captive, while the Babylonians took the southern nation of Judah captive. Both nations were ruthless in their campaigns, destroying everything in their wake. And yes, the Bible records show that Israel did turn to cannibalism during the siege of Nebuchadnezzar, as recorded in Jeremiah 19, verse 9. God knew what he was talking about here because he knew the hearts of man. He knows what would fall upon them when we fall into sin, and what terrible things we do. Now, just because God predicted these things here didn't mean that Israel had to rebel. No, they could have obeyed, but they chose to rebel. And these things happened as a result. We'll conclude chapter 28, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Deuteronomy 28, verses 58 to 68, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.